Straight into it with my panel, One Nation Chief of Staff James Ashby and the Deputy Executive Director of the IPA, Dan Wild. I'll start with Farah, if I can, please, James. A by-election date yet to be determined, but imminent, of course. It'll be a Melbourne Cup field. It won't just be the four that I've talked about into the break. It'll be many others as well, including a Climate 200 type. They were there last time. Helen Dalton was shooters, fishers, farmers. A long history in the water debate. There's talk she'll come along and run for you. And I noticed Pauline's statement on Friday regarding this seat mentioned water. Is she your pick?
No, she's not. There are 75 people who've put expressions of interests in over the last 48 hours. And, of course, because there hasn't been an election date scheduled by the Speaker of the House, we still have plenty of time to be able to go through those 75 applicants. I think it's only fair to do that, all of which are members of our branch. And, Peter, I've got to be honest, Farah is the second largest branch that One Nation have in the country, only just shy of New England. So there are plenty of options. There's some people in the mix that have got AOs. There are cotton farmers. There are people on boards. So there's some really good talent there. And, of course, the biggest issues are water. The gun issue has not escaped the people of Farah. It might have been a state decision by the Minns government, but it's also been legislated and led by the federal government as well. And that has not diminished people's feelings out there for One Nation, because they feel we're the only party that will stand up for people's legal rights to own guns, especially in those rural areas.
I'm going to get out there. I know Farah well. I know many of that Riverina country, so I'll get out on the ground and I'll give my viewers a view from there once I've had a talk to some locals in plenty of pubs up and down that area. If I can bring you in on this, Dan, Jeff Kennedy in Victoria says the Libs to win there, to beat off a bad Labor government under Jacinta Allan, really need to get into bed and do a sort of a grand coalition with One Nation. Now, you go back even 12 months, you'd never get that sort of thinking in Victoria. Do you think it should happen?
Well, there's a couple of things about preference deals. I mean, the first thing is if the Liberal Party wants to survive and get into government, whether at a state level or federal level, they've got to get the primary vote up. So all of the discussion here needs to be focused on how does the Liberal Party get its primary vote up. Number two, as James and yourself would well know from your experience in politics, you can do all the preference deals that you want, but unless you're communicating that with voters, unless you're getting the how to vote cards into their hands or on their phones, or you're telling them some other way of how you would like them to vote, it amounts to nothing. And we know that only about a third of people walking into the booths take an actual physical how to vote card now. And I think that trust in politicians and political parties is so low that if you tell people to vote one way, they're just as likely to vote the other way. So, 20 years ago, sure, that strategy might work, but yes, preference deals are important, but I just don't know if they're as important as they used to be. So all of the focus, certainly for the Liberal Party, has to be how do you get the primary vote up, and talk about preferences, I think, can come a bit later.
James, quick one from you on this, because I want to ask you about the IMF in a moment, but would you do a deal with the Libs in Victoria? And what do you think about that comment, re-preferences?
Well, don't dismiss the simple fact that the Allan government could make changes to the way that preferences work in Victoria. That has been sort of flouted in the background. So that would be a good move, to be quite frank, because Victoria is one of the few states left where preference deals can be done secretly behind closed doors. I don't want to see that. So if they do make that change, I'd welcome it. We as One Nation would have to have rocks in our head to suggest that we would support the Greens or the Labor, because, as you rightfully point out, the International Monetary Fund is now suggesting to the federal government, because of the poor operational handling, the economic instability of Victoria, that we should raise taxes right across the country to pay for the faults and the mismanagement of this terrible, terrible Labor government. So all I simply say is we will not do a deal with the devil. The devil is Labor, the devil is Greens, and as far as I'm concerned, One Nation will be putting them last.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just spoke to Sarah Henderson about the CFMEU and the $15 billion allegedly funneled to crooks and organised crime from taxpayers in Victoria. And you don't think it matters to you in Queensland or WA, when the federal government has to step in and bail out Victoria, everyone around the country will pay.